Hello, my name is Colleen Harper. I'm 36 years old, a product manager living in Louisville, Kentucky. I've built a steady life for myself and my 12-year-old son. But last month, in the dining room of the home I bought, a family dinner that was meant to feel warm turned into something no one saw coming. My father suddenly screamed in my face, "You and your kid are just freeloaders." My mother didn't argue. She simply smiled and nodded like she agreed with every word. And the cruel irony was they were still living under my roof. I didn't cry. I didn't shout back. I just stared straight at them and delivered one sentence that froze the entire room. From that moment, everything started to fall apart. Why did I have to confront my parents like that? What broke our relationship so deeply that it might never recover? And what would you do if you were standing in my place? Share your thoughts. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. To understand why I finally drew that line, I need to take you back to the beginning. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, in a modest two-story house with creaky floors and a backyard that always smelled like fresh-cut grass. I was 18, full of dreams, when everything flipped upside down. My grandfather had died a year earlier, leaving me $100,000 in his will, a safety net meant for my future, maybe college or a solid start in life. I was excited, ready to study computer science, imagining a career where I could finally build something of my own. But my parents had other plans. One sticky summer night, they called me into the living room. My father sat rigidly in his old recliner, arms crossed, his face hard. My mother stood by the window, not meeting my eyes. They didn't waste time. "We need your inheritance," my father said, his voice flat, like he was commenting on the weather. I blinked, confused. "Need it for what?" I asked, my stomach nodding. My mother finally turned toward me, guilt and determination blending on her face. "Your brother has a chance to make it big," she said. "He's starting a construction business with your father. They need capital to launch. It's a sure thing, Colleen. We'll pay you back." Philip, my older brother, their golden child, wasn't even there to explain himself. 2 years older, charming, the one they poured all their hopes into. I was the afterthought, expected to fall in line. I stood there clutching my University of Louisville acceptance letter for their engineering program. "What about my college?" I asked, my voice trembling. My father shrugged. "You can get loans, Colleen. This is for the family." My mother nodded quickly. "Philip's business will set us all up. You'll see." It felt like the air vanished. $100,000, my future, was gone, redirected to a dream I never signed up for. They didn't ask permission. They just took it, promising they'd pay me back once the business thrived. Spoiler alert, it didn't. The company collapsed within a year, ruined by bad contracts and even worse choices. And my parents never mentioned repayment, not once. That night, I made my choice. I packed a duffel bag with clothes, my laptop, and the $500 I'd saved from babysitting. I walked out without saying goodbye. No one stopped me. No one called to see if I was safe. I was 18, alone, and determined to prove I didn't need them. I moved into a cramped apartment near campus, sharing it with 2 strangers just to afford rent. I enrolled in college, but tuition hit hard. I worked 3 jobs, waitressing at a diner, stocking shelves at a grocery store, and tutoring high school kids in math. Some nights I collapsed on a thin mattress on the floor, too exhausted to eat. There were weeks when I lived on instant noodles and coffee, stretching every dollar to cover books or bills. I'd stare at my acceptance letter pinned to the wall and remind myself why I kept going. My parents' words echoed in my head. This is for the family. Their family never meant me. College was brutal, but I pushed through. I studied late into the night, fueled by spite and a stubborn need to prove them wrong. My parents called maybe twice a year, always with the same script. "How's school?" my mother would ask, her tone distant. Before I could answer, she'd shift to, "Your brother's working so hard on his new project." Philip, always Philip. Never question about my rent, my meals, or my survival. I stopped expecting them to care. By senior year, I was burned out but unbreakable. I graduated with a computer science degree, top of my class, and landed an entry-level job at a tech startup in Louisville. For the first time, I could breathe. I paid off my student loans little by little, moved into a small but decent apartment, and started building a real life. Then, I met my ex-husband. He was a colleague, sharp, funny, and someone who seemed solid. We got married, had my son, and for a moment, I thought I'd finally found stability. But life had other plans. 3 years in, I found the text on his phone, proof he'd been cheating for months. I didn't beg him to stay. I packed his bags, set them by the door, and said, "Get out." He left, but he stayed involved in our son's life and sent money every month. That was enough for me. Those years shaped me into someone who doesn't bend. I fought for every inch of my success, while my parents and Philip drifted along on excuses. They never apologized for taking my inheritance, never acknowledged the nights I went hungry. That betrayal planted a quiet seed of resentment, one that grew over the years, waiting for the moment I'd be forced to confront them again. At 36, I've built a life I'm proud of. My job isn't just a paycheck. It's proof of every late night I studied, every shift I worked to survive college. I manage a team that builds software people rely on, and I'm damn good at it. My name carries weight in the industry, something I earned, not inherited. I own a 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb with a mortgage I pay on time and a backyard where my son plays soccer. This life, this stability, it's mine, built from nothing. My son Dylan is 12 now, the center of my world. He has this infectious laugh that makes even my worst days feel lighter. Whether he's acing math tests or begging to stay up for just one more video game, I see so much of myself in him. The stubborn streak, the quiet determination. I make sure he knows he's enough, that he never has to prove his worth to anyone. Every weekend, we have our ritual. Pizza, a movie, and him rambling excitedly about his dreams of becoming an astronaut. I would move mountains for that kid, and he knows it. He's my reason for everything. My parents, on the other hand, are another story entirely. After I left at 18, they rarely reached out. A birthday card here, a Christmas call there. Always brief, always hollow. But over the last few years, their messages started shifting. My mother would text, "How's work?" Not because she cared, but because it was her lead-in to ask for money. "Your father's business isn't doing well," she'd write. Or, "Philip's starting something new. Could you help out?" The first time, I sent a couple thousand, thinking it was a one-time emergency. But the requests kept coming. $5,000 for a car repair. $10,000 for a business opportunity. I started saying no. Each refusal made her messages sharper. "You're doing so well. Can't you spare something for family?" My father called once, his voice gruff. "We sacrificed so much for you, Colleen." Sacrificed? What exactly? The inheritance they took? The years they ignored me? I stopped responding altogether. I'd see their names pop up on my phone, my mother, my father, and let the calls go to voicemail. Philip never called himself. He didn't need to. My parents spoke for him. I knew they were still propping him up, still gambling on his next big idea, while I built my life from the ground up. It stung, but I learned to live with it. I had Dylan, my career, and a circle of friends who felt more like family than the people who raised me. One of those friends is Denise Bailey, my best friend and my financial advisor. She's been my rock since we met at a networking event 5 years ago. Denise helped me buy my house, set up Dylan's college fund, and plan for a future where I never have to fear financial instability again. She's blunt, no nonsense, and fiercely loyal. When I told her about my parents' constant requests for money, she didn't soften the truth. "They're using you," she said, firm and steady. "You don't owe them a dime." Her words stuck with me, strengthening the boundaries I'd started to set. I thought I'd finally found balance, work, Dylan, a life I could truly call my own. I wasn't searching for closure or reconciliation with my parents. I just wanted to move forward. But then my mother's number flashed on my phone one evening, her voice trembling with urgency. That call dragged me right back into the chaos I'd spent years escaping. It was a quiet Tuesday night. I was helping Dylan with his math homework, his pencil scratching across the notebook as we sat at the kitchen table. My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, my mother's name. I hadn't spoken to her in months, not since her last vague request for $10,000. I let it ring, debating whether to ignore it. But something inside me stirred, maybe guilt, maybe curiosity, and I answered. Her voice was shaky, not the usual calculated tone she used when asking for money. "Colleen, it's your father," she said. "He's sick. Really sick. We need you to come home." I froze, the word home hitting me like a slap. Home, the place where they'd taken my inheritance, the place I walked away from with nothing. I pressed the phone tighter, my heart thudding. "What's wrong with him?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She hesitated, then said, "It's his heart. The doctors say he needs surgery. But we're in trouble. The bank is threatening to foreclose on the house, $300,000 in debt from your father's latest business venture." Her words came rushed, almost frantic, but underneath them I heard something familiar, the same old angle. They needed something from me. I leaned back in my chair, glancing at Dylan, who was watching me with those big, curious eyes. "What do you want me to do about it?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. My mother didn't hesitate. "Come back, Colleen.
Talk to the bank.
Maybe help us out. You're doing so well, and we're family." There it was, the same tired line she'd used for years. Family. I wanted to laugh, but instead my throat tightened. I told her I'd think about it, and hung up, my mind spinning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the couch, a glass of wine untouched on the coffee table as her words replayed in my head. My father sick. The house at risk. $300,000. It wasn't just the money. It was the weight of everything I'd buried since walking away. Part of me wanted to ignore them, let them sink or swim on their own. They'd never cared about my struggles, so why should I care about theirs? But another part, the one that remembered my father teaching me to ride a bike or my mother baking cookies when I was little, nudged me gently. What if I didn't go back? Would I regret it when it was too late? I called Denise the next morning. She picked up on the first ring, her voice brisk and clear. "Don't let them guilt-trip you," she said when I explained the situation. "They've been draining you for years. You don't owe them anything." And I knew she was right. Denise always saw straight through the noise. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to face them. Not for them, but for myself. If my father really was sick, I didn't want to live with the what-ifs. I told her I was going back to Louisville, not to rescue them, but to close a chapter I'd left open too long. That evening, I sat Dylan down and explained I'd be gone for a few days. "Is Grandpa okay?" he asked quietly. I hated that he felt worried about a man he barely knew, thanks to my parents choosing absence over involvement. "I don't know yet," I said softly, brushing his hair back. "But I'll be back soon, and we'll have pizza night." "Okay," he nodded, trusting me completely. That trust, his trust, is what kept me grounded. Packing felt surreal. I hadn't been to my parents' house in years, not since a tense Christmas visit when Dylan was 5. I booked a flight, arranged for Dylan to stay with a trusted neighbor, and called my boss to take a few days off. My stomach churned the whole time. I wasn't just returning to a house. I was stepping into a battlefield. My mother's call wasn't just about my father or the foreclosure. It was a demand dressed in desperation. I knew they'd ask for money, probably more than I could imagine. And Philip was almost certainly lurking in the background, ready to benefit from whatever I gave. When the plane touched down in Louisville, I felt a mix of dread and resolve. I rented a car and drove to the house I once called home. It looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling, the lawn overgrown. My mother greeted me at the door, her face pale but composed. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. I nodded, stepping inside, bracing for whatever came next. My father sat in the living room, looking friendlier than I'd ever seen him, though his eyes still held that stubborn spark. Philip wasn't there. Not surprising. They didn't waste time. Over coffee, my mother laid everything out. The bank was moving fast and they needed me to step in. "You've got the means," she said, her voice shifting from pleading to expectant. I listened silently, my thoughts already drifting toward the confrontation I knew was coming. The next evening, I agreed to stay for a family dinner. That's when everything unraveled. The table was set neatly, but I wasn't prepared for the ambush waiting for me. I'd hoped for a civil conversation, maybe an honest update about my father's health or the looming foreclosure. Instead, I walked straight into a setup. My parents had invited my brother, Philip, who strolled in late with his usual smug grin. My mother fussed over him, piling food onto his plate, while my father sat at the head of the table, tense and silent. I took my seat, my stomach tight, sensing the storm building. The first few minutes were deceptively calm. My mother talked about neighbors I barely remembered, her voice bright and brittle, trying too hard to smooth over the cracks. Philip bragged about his newest business idea, another vague real estate venture that sounded as flimsy as every other dream he'd chased. I nodded politely, picking at my food, waiting for the real reason I had been dragged there. My father broke the silence, his voice low and deliberate. "Colleen, we need to talk about the house," he said, leaning forward. "The bank's not budging. We owe $300,000, and they're ready to take it all." I set my fork down and met his stare. "I know," I said calmly. "You told me yesterday. What's the plan?" My mother jumped in, her tone turning sharp. "The plan is you, Colleen. You're making good money, $350,000 a year, right? You could cover at least $200,000. It's the least you can do for family." Her words landed like a punch. $200,000. Not a request, not a conversation, just a demand, as if everything I'd worked for belonged to them by default. I took a slow breath, forcing my voice to stay steady. "That's a lot of money," I said. "I have my own responsibilities. My son, my house, my future. Why is this on me?" My father's face hardened, his eyes narrowing. "You've always been selfish," he snapped. "We raised you, gave you everything, and now you're hoarding your money while we lose our home." I stared at him, stunned. Gave me everything. They had taken my inheritance, left me to survive alone at 18, and now I was the selfish one? Philip chimed in, his voice dripping with condescension. "Come on, Colleen. Don't play the victim. You're sitting pretty while we're drowning. Step up." My fists clenched under the table, heat rising in my chest. They hadn't even asked about Dylan, my son, who was back home with a neighbor. They didn't care about my life, my sacrifices, my son. They only cared about what they could squeeze out of me. I was about to speak when my mother leaned forward, her smile cold and calculated. "You and your son are just freeloaders," she said, her voice slicing through the room. "Living off our sacrifices, acting like you're better than us." The word freeloaders cut deep, but it was Dylan's name, her dragging my child into this, that snapped something inside me. I pushed back my chair, rising slowly, my voice low and firm. "Don't you dare bring my son into this," I said, locking eyes with her. "You have no right to talk about him or me like that." My father scoffed, his face reddening. "Show some respect, Colleen. We're your parents." I almost laughed at the hypocrisy. Respect? From the people who took everything from me. I turned to Philip, my eyes sharp. "And you, coasting on their excuses your entire life, letting them beg and scrape for you. Don't you dare tell me how to live." His smirk vanished, though he kept his mouth shut. My mother tried to speak, her voice rising. "Colleen, you owe us. We're family." I cut her off, my patience finally shattering. Family doesn't demand what I've earned. Family doesn't insult my son. You want to call us freeloaders? Fine. I'm done. My heart pounded, but my resolve was unshakable. I looked from my father to my mother, then to Philip, and made my decision. "I'm through letting you walk over me," I said, each word deliberate. "I'll take charge of this for me and Dylan, not for you." My mother laughed, her tone dripping with disdain. "Take charge? You've always been a dreamer, Colleen. You'll never outdo us." I held her gaze, unflinching. "Keep talking. You'll see." The room fell silent, their faces twisted with shock and contempt. My father slammed his hand on the table, growling, You think you're better than us? You're nothing without this family. But I didn't flinch. I'd built my entire life without them, and their words couldn't touch me anymore. I walked out of the dining room with steady hands, my mind already shaping a plan. That night, I called Denise. Her voice was a lifeline. "You're really done with them?" she asked, her tone a mix of worry and pride. "I have to be," I said. "For Dylan. For me." She didn't argue, just promised she'd help. But I knew the fight wasn't over. 2 days after the dinner, my phone started buzzing nonstop. Friends, coworkers, even Dylan's soccer coach sent messages. "Have you seen this?" I opened TikTok and there it was. A video from my mother's account. Her face streaked with fake tears, her voice trembling with rehearsed sadness. "My daughter abandoned us," she said, clutching a tissue. "She has all this money, but won't help her own family save our home. She's turned her back on us, on her own blood." The caption screamed, "Ungrateful daughter leaves parents to lose everything." It had thousands of views, hundreds of comments calling me heartless, selfish, a disgrace. My stomach twisted. Eleanor had aired our private nightmare publicly, twisting the truth to cast me as the villain. I sat on my hotel bed, staring at the screen as rage shook through me. She hadn't just attacked me. She had dragged Dylan into it, implying he was part of my so-called betrayal. I wanted to fire back, post my own video, expose everything, the inheritance they stole, the insults, the freeloader comment. But reacting in anger would only fuel her narrative. I needed to be smart, strategic. I called Denise. She picked up immediately. "I saw the video," she said before I could even speak. "It's disgusting. Colleen, what do you want to do?" I paced the room, my mind sharp despite the fury. "I want to take control," I said, my voice steady. "They're not going to bully me into submission. Not this time." Denise didn't hesitate. "Then let's hit them where it hurts. The house, they're desperate to keep it. And you've got the means. Buy it out from under them." The idea sparked something in me. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming what they'd tried to strip away, my power, my dignity, my voice. I told Denise to start the process, and she promised to connect me with a lawyer the next morning. The following day, I met with the real estate attorney Denise recommended, a sharp, composed woman named Laura. She laid everything out clearly. The bank was ready to foreclose on my parents' house after they defaulted on their $300,000 loan. Laura confirmed I could buy the property directly from the bank, wiping out their claim entirely. "It won't be cheap," she warned, "but your finances can handle it. You'd own the house outright, and they'd have no leverage." I nodded, my resolve strengthening. This wasn't about rescuing them. It was about ending their grip on my life once and for all. Denise did her magic, pulling together my savings, investments, and a loan I could comfortably handle. Within a week, we had a deal with the bank. I signed the papers, my hand steady, as I became the legal owner of the house I'd grown up in. It felt surreal, like stitching closed a wound that had been open for decades. But I wasn't finished. I asked Laura to draft a contract allowing my parents to stay in the house, but only if they agreed to repay the $300,000 over 5 years, with interest. If they missed a payment, they'd be out. It was a lifeline, but one tied firmly to my terms. I didn't tell them immediately. Instead, I had Laura send an official notice to my parents and Philip, outlining the new reality. I owned the house, and they were now tenants bound by my conditions. The notice included a cease and desist letter demanding Eleanor take down the TikTok video and stop spreading lies. "Defamation has consequences," Laura wrote, her words crisp and uncompromising. I knew my mother would see it as a slap, but I didn't care. She had crossed a line, and I was done playing nice. When the notice arrived, my mother called, her voice shrill with fury. "You think you can control us, Colleen?" she spat. "You're no better than us, throwing your money around like you're some big shot." I let her rant, my silence louder than anything she said. "You got the notice," I said finally. "Follow it or face the consequences." Then I hung up, my heart racing, but my conscience clear. Philip texted later, one cold line, "You're ruthless." I didn't respond. He wasn't wrong, but I wasn't sorry either. I flew back to Louisville that weekend and picked up Dylan from our neighbor. He ran to me, his smile bright enough to heal bruises I didn't even know I had. "Did you fix everything?" he asked, his voice full of trust. I hugged him tight, my throat thick. "I'm working on it, kid," I said. I didn't tell him about the house or the video. Not yet. He didn't need that weight. But I knew the fight was far from over. My mother's silence after our last call felt calculated, like she was already planning her next move. That evening, Denise and I sat together, going over the paperwork. "You're playing a dangerous game," she said, half warning, half admiration. "They're not going to take this lying down." I nodded, staring at the contract in my hands. I had finally taken a stand, and I was ready for whatever storm came next. My mother didn't stay quiet for long. A week after the legal notice was delivered, I got a call from Laura. Her voice was calm, but firm. "They're refusing to sign the contract," she said. "Your parents claim they don't owe you anything and demand to stay in the house." I wasn't surprised. Eleanor and Kenneth had spent their lives dodging accountability, twisting every situation to play the victims. But this time I held every card. I owned the house, every square foot, and their refusal only sealed their fate. I told Laura to proceed with eviction. "No more chances," I said, my voice steady. They made their choice. The eviction process wasn't quick, but it was thorough. Laura filed the paperwork, and a court date was set. My parents fought back, of course. Eleanor sent a flurry of texts, each one sharper than the last. "You're tearing this family apart," she wrote. "How can you do this to your own blood?" I didn't reply. Her words stung, but they didn't sway me. She'd called Dylan a freeloader, smeared me on TikTok, and still expected me to bankroll their chaos. Kenneth's messages were colder, more direct. "You'll regret this, Colleen." I saved every text and voicemail, handing everything to Laura as evidence of their hostility. Philip stayed mostly silent, but I knew he was there, encouraging them from the shadows, the golden child who had always relied on their blind devotion. When Laura served the eviction notice in person, she told me Philip was present, his face pale, his mouth tight. He didn't dare confront me directly, not after I'd called him out at dinner. The notice gave them 30 days to vacate. If they didn't, the sheriff would get involved. I didn't want it to come to that, but I was prepared. I'd spent too many years letting them walk over me. I wasn't bending now. By the end of the month, they were gone. Laura confirmed they'd moved out, leaving the house in disarray, boxes half-packed, furniture shoved aside, like they'd stormed out in a final tantrum. I flew back to Louisville to inspect the property. Walking through the rooms felt surreal, like stepping into memories I never wanted to revisit. The kitchen where my mother once baked cookies was now cluttered with unwashed dishes. My old bedroom, the place where I once imagined a life beyond their reach, had been turned into storage for Philip's abandoned ventures. I didn't linger. Instead, I hired a cleaning crew and put the house up for rent. The income would cover the loan I'd taken to buy it, and anything left over would go straight into Dylan's college fund. Word eventually reached me that my parents had rented a small apartment on the edge of town. Kenneth's health was still fragile, but he was managing, according to a mutual acquaintance. They'd found part-time work, Eleanor at a grocery store, Kenneth doing bookkeeping for a local business. For the first time in years, they were forced to stand on their own. Philip, unsurprisingly, had moved in with them, still chasing his next big idea. I didn't ask for details. Their lives were no longer my burden. Cutting ties was harder than I expected. Not because I craved their approval. I'd stopped wanting that a long time ago, but because letting go meant closing a door I'd secretly hoped might one day open to something better. I blocked their numbers, deleted their messages, and unfollowed Eleanor's TikTok account. The video she'd posted was gone after Laura's cease and desist letter, but the comments still echoed in my mind. Strangers had called me cruel, heartless, a bad daughter without knowing a single truth behind the years of betrayal. I kept reminding myself their voices didn't matter. I knew my truth, and that would have to be enough. Dylan became my anchor. When I returned home, he was waiting with a drawing, a rocket ship shooting past the moon, every line filled with his dream of becoming an astronaut. "For you, Mom," he said, grinning wide. I hugged him tightly, my heart full. Every step I'd taken, the house, the fight, the eviction, was for him.